The soldier's name was Marcus Kane, and he had seen his fair share of strange things in the galaxy. But nothing could have prepared him for what happened when he set foot on the alien planet of Zalora Prime. It was a world unlike any other. Its skies shimmered with hues of gold and violet. Its forests glowed faintly under twin moons, and its inhabitants were tall, graceful beings with translucent skin that refracted light like prisms. Marcus landed there by accident, or so it seemed at first. His ship had been caught in an asteroid storm during a routine patrol mission near the outer rim of the galaxy. With systems failing and oxygen running low, he ejected himself into space inside an escape pod. When he woke up, he found himself lying on soft moss-like grass surrounded by towering crystalline trees that hummed softly as if alive. Before panic could fully take hold, a group of Zylorans appeared, their elongated limbs moving fluidly as they approached him cautiously but not aggressively. They spoke in melodic tones, their language flowing like music. Through gestures and universal translators built into his suit, Marcus learned they meant no harm. In fact, they treated him like some kind of divine visitor. They draped him in silken robes adorned with glowing patterns that shifted whenever he moved. Then, amidst cheers from the crowd, they escorted him to their royal palace, a breathtaking structure made entirely of living crystal that pulsed gently, almost breathing. Inside the palace, everything sparkled. The air smelled sweet, like honey mixed with flowers unknown to Earth. Servants scurried around, attending to Marcus's every need before he even realized he had one. He was given food that tasted like nothing he'd ever eaten before. Fruits that burst with flavors both familiar and exotic. Drinks that fizzed pleasantly down his throat. Every moment felt surreal, like stepping into a dream where he was no longer just a human soldier but something far greater. Then came the queen. Her name was Vaelithra, and she was stunning. Unlike her subjects, whose translucent skin revealed delicate veins of bioluminescent colors, Vaelithra's body shimmered with a radiant golden glow. She wore a crown that looked like liquid starlight frozen atop her head, and her eyes held depths that seemed to pierce through time itself. She greeted Marcus warmly, bowing slightly, a gesture that shocked him because queens didn't bow to mere soldiers back home. "Welcome, honored guest," she said, her voice resonating like chimes in the wind. "You are most welcome here." Before Marcus could stammer out a response, Vaelithra extended an invitation that left him utterly speechless. "Tonight," she announced, "you shall dine with me and my daughters. And perhaps," she paused, tilting her head thoughtfully, "perhaps more than dine." Her words sent ripples of disbelief through Marcus's mind. Was this really happening? Was he being propositioned by an alien queen? His cheeks burned despite himself, and he tried to play it cool, nodding awkwardly while silently praying he wouldn't offend anyone by declining later. Still, the idea of spending the night with royalty, even alien royalty, was enough to make his heart race. As evening fell, Marcus was led to a grand chamber filled with floating orbs of light that cast dancing shadows across the walls. There, seated around a long table made of polished obsidian, were Vaelithra and her 3 daughters. Each daughter was unique yet equally captivating. Lysara, the eldest, had hair that flowed like molten silver, cascading down her back in waves. Nyxarin, the middle child, bore intricate markings across her face that shifted like constellations. And then there was Alira, the youngest, whose laughter sounded like tinkling bells and who kept sneaking curious glances at Marcus throughout the meal. The feast was extravagant, with dishes arriving one after another on trays carried by servants who moved with silent grace. Between bites of food that seemed to dissolve into pure energy upon contact with his tongue, Marcus struggled to keep up with the conversation. Vaelithra asked questions about Earth, its people, its customs. Her daughters chimed in eagerly, fascinated by tales of cities sprawling across continents and machines capable of flight without wings. At one point, Lysara leaned closer, her luminous eyes locking onto Marcus's. "Tell us, noble warrior," she purred. "Do all humans fight as fiercely as you?" Marcus nearly choked on his drink. Well, I wouldn't say noble or fierce. I'm just doing my job." Nyxarin smirked, tracing a finger along the edge of her goblet. "Modesty suits you, human. It is rare among warriors." Alira giggled, nudging her sister playfully. "Maybe we should teach him how we celebrate victories here." Vaelithra watched the exchange with amusement, her golden aura brightening slightly. "Indeed," she said, raising her glass. "Let tonight be a celebration of unity between our worlds." Marcus raised his own glass, feeling increasingly out of his depth. Yet, beneath the surface-level charm and hospitality, something nagged at him, an unease he couldn't quite place. Perhaps it was the way the servants avoided meeting his gaze, or how the palace's crystalline walls seemed to hum louder the closer he got to certain rooms. Whatever it was, it lingered in the corners of his mind like a shadow waiting to strike. Just as dessert, a dish of shimmering gelatinous spheres that tasted like sunshine, was served, a young Zayloran girl entered the room. Unlike the others, she wasn't dressed in finery. Her simple tunic was stained, and her bare feet left faint imprints on the floor. She walked straight toward Marcus, ignoring the disapproving looks from the attendants. "You're going to be sacrificed," she whispered urgently, her voice trembling. Time froze. The room seemed to tilt, and Marcus blinked rapidly, unsure if he'd heard correctly. Sacrificed? What did that even mean? Before he could ask, strong hands grabbed him from behind, pulling him away from the table. Panic surged through him as he struggled against the grip, shouting protests that echoed off the crystal walls. "What is the meaning of this?" Vaelithra demanded, rising to her feet. Her golden glow dimmed slightly, replaced by a flicker of irritation. The girl stood her ground, pointing an accusatory finger at the queen. "He doesn't know. None of them ever do. You lure them here with kindness, trick them into thinking they're special, and then—" "Silence!" Vaelithra snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Guards, remove her immediately." But the damage was done. Marcus's mind raced as pieces began falling into place. The lavish treatment, the queen's flirtatious advances, the odd behavior of the servants. It all made sense now. Or rather, it made horrifying sense. He wasn't a guest. He was a pawn in some twisted ritual. "No!" Marcus shouted, twisting violently in the guard's grasp. "Let me go. This isn't right." The queen sighed, her expression softening slightly. "Please calm yourself, Marcus. This is not what it seems." "Not what it seems?" he spat, incredulous. "That girl just told me I'm going to die." Vaelithra exchanged a glance with her daughters, who looked uneasy but remained silent. Finally, she turned back to Marcus, her voice taking on a tone of reluctant sincerity. "Yes, there is a ceremony, but it is not death, not in the way you think. It is transformation, a joining with the essence of our world." Marcus stopped struggling, though his heart still pounded wildly. "Transformation? What does that even mean?" "It means becoming part of something greater," Vaelithra explained. "Your energy, your spirit will merge with ours. You will live on, immortal, within the crystal heart of Zaylora Prime." The concept was too much to process. Immortality sounded appealing in theory, but the idea of losing himself, his identity, his humanity, terrified him. Meanwhile, the young girl continued to shout from the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "They lie. They always lie. Don't let them take you." Marcus locked eyes with her, searching for answers. Why was she risking so much to warn him? Who was she, really? And most importantly, how could he possibly escape this fate? Before he could act, the guards dragged the girl away, her cries fading into the distance. Vaelithra gestured for the remaining attendants to leave, leaving only herself, her daughters, and Marcus in the room. The atmosphere grew tense, heavy with unspoken truths. "We do not wish to harm you, Marcus," Vaelithra said gently. "But this is our way. Our survival depends on it." "Survival?" Marcus echoed, narrowing his eyes. "What aren't you telling me?" For the first time, cracks appeared in the queen's composed demeanor. She hesitated, exchanging another glance with her daughters. Then, reluctantly, she began to explain. Long ago, Zaylora Prime had thrived as a vibrant, self-sustaining ecosystem. The planet's core, a massive, sentient crystal known as the Lumina Heart, provided endless energy, nourishing the land and its people. But over centuries, the Lumina Heart began to weaken, its power waning. Without intervention, the entire planet would perish, leaving nothing but barren rock behind. Desperate to save their world, the Zylorans discovered a solution. External energy sources could temporarily rejuvenate the Lumina Heart. However, these sources needed to be compatible with the crystal's unique resonance. After countless failed experiments, they stumbled upon an unexpected truth. Human life force resonated perfectly with the Lumina Heart. Thus began the tradition of inviting humans to Zaylora Prime under the guise of friendship and celebration. Unbeknownst to their guests, the ceremonies culminated in a transfer of energy, leaving the human participant transformed into pure essence absorbed by the Lumina heart. To the Xylorans, this was a sacred act, ensuring the continuation of their civilization. To outsiders like Marcus, it was nothing short of horrifying. As Velathra finished her explanation, Marcus stared at her, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "So, you've been lying to me this whole time? Pretending to care, pretending to offer me a place here, when all along you planned to use me as fuel for your dying planet." "It is not deception," Nyxarin interjected, her voice calm but firm. "It is necessity. Would you deny us the chance to survive? That's not your choice to make." Marcus shot back, his voice rising. "You don't get to decide whether I live or die." Lysara stepped forward, her silver hair catching the light. "Think of it this way, Marcus. Your sacrifice will save billions. Is that not noble?" "Noble?" Marcus scoffed, shaking his head. "No. Noble is giving someone a choice. Noble is honesty. This is manipulation." Alira, the youngest, looked conflicted, her bell-like laughter absent now. "Mother, maybe he's right. Maybe we shouldn't force him." Velathra silenced her with a stern look. "Enough. We cannot abandon our traditions. Not now. Not when the Lumina heart grows weaker with each passing day." The tension in the room thickened, palpable enough to choke on. Marcus knew he had to think fast. If he couldn't reason with them, he'd have to find another way out. But how? Surrounded by aliens who viewed his existence as expendable, escape seemed impossible. Then, an idea struck him, one born of desperation but fueled by hope. If the Lumina heart truly resonated with human energy, perhaps it could also respond to human emotion. After all, hadn't the palace reacted to his presence earlier, its crystals humming louder in certain areas? Maybe there was a way to communicate with the Lumina heart directly, bypassing the Xylorans entirely. "I'll do it," Marcus said suddenly, surprising everyone, including himself. "I'll undergo the ceremony. On one condition." Velathra arched an eyebrow, intrigued. "And what might that be?" "I want to see the Lumina heart myself. Alone. Before anything happens." His request hung in the air, met with silence. The queen studied him carefully, weighing his words. Finally, she nodded. "Very well. But know this, if you try to deceive us, the consequences will be severe." Marcus forced a smile, masking the storm of fear and determination brewing inside him. "Don't worry. I won't disappoint." With that, he was led deeper into the palace, toward the legendary Lumina heart. As they walked, Marcus noticed subtle changes in the environment. The air grew warmer, charged with static electricity. The crystals lining the walls pulsed faster, their glow intensifying. It was as if the very building sensed his approach and awaited his arrival. When they reached the chamber housing the Lumina heart, Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The crystal towered above him, its surface swirling with iridescent colors that seemed alive. It pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat, filling the room with a low, resonant hum. For a moment, he forgot his predicament, awestruck by the sheer beauty and power of the artifact. Alone now, Marcus took a deep breath and stepped closer. He didn't know if his plan would work, but he had to try. Closing his eyes, he focused on projecting every ounce of emotion he possessed. His fear, his anger, his determination, toward the Lumina heart. "Listen to me," he whispered, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "I'm not just energy. I'm a person, and I deserve a choice." The crystal responded. Its hum grew louder, vibrating through the floor and up into Marcus's body. Colors swirled faster, forming patterns that resembled faces. Faces of those who had come before him, their expressions etched with sorrow and longing. Marcus realized then that the Lumina heart wasn't just a machine. It was sentient, aware of the lives it consumed. Encouraged, Marcus pressed on. "If you need energy, take mine, but let me keep my soul. Let me stay who I am." The Lumina heart pulsed once, twice, then went still. For a heartbeat, Marcus feared he'd failed. But then, a single beam of light shot out, enveloping him in warmth. He felt understood, accepted. Behind him, the doors burst open, and Velathra rushed in, her golden glow flickering with alarm. "What have you done?" she demanded. Marcus turned to face her, a newfound confidence burning in his chest. "I've made a deal, one you can't break." And with that, the battle for control over Marcus's fate truly began. The days that followed were a blur of despair for Marcus. After his encounter with the Lumina Heart, he was thrown into a crystalline cell deep beneath the palace. The walls shimmered faintly, casting eerie patterns on the floor, but there was no warmth in their glow, only cold indifference. Guards patrolled outside his door at all times, their translucent forms moving silently like ghosts. He had no idea what Vaelithra planned to do next, but one thing was certain. He wasn't leaving this place alive unless something drastic changed. Marcus spent most of his time pacing the tiny cell, replaying every detail of his conversation with the Lumina Heart. It had responded to him, it understood him, but understanding didn't mean freedom. Whatever deal he thought he'd made, it clearly hadn't been enough to sway the queen or her daughters. They still saw him as expendable, a tool to be used and discarded. On the third day, just as exhaustion began to weigh heavily on him, the heavy crystalline door slid open with a soft hum. Marcus froze, expecting another round of questioning or perhaps even the final act of his ceremony. Instead, standing in the doorway was the same young alien girl who had warned him about the sacrifice. She wore the uniform of a palace guard now, her tunic bearing the insignia of Zelora's royal protectors. Her face was calm, though her eyes darted nervously down the corridor behind her. "Come on," she whispered urgently, motioning for him to follow. "We don't have much time." For a moment Marcus hesitated. This girl had already risked everything once by speaking out against the queen. Why would she risk it again? And more importantly, could he trust her? "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. "If they catch you." She rolled her eyes, exasperated. "Do you want to get out of here or not? Stop asking questions and move." Her tone left little room for argument. Marcus stepped forward, his legs stiff from days of confinement. As soon as he crossed the threshold, she grabbed his arm and pulled him into the shadows of the dimly lit hallway. Together, they moved quickly, weaving through narrow passages that seemed to twist endlessly. The air grew cooler the farther they went, and the humming of the palace crystals faded into silence. After several minutes of frantic running, Marcus finally found his voice. "Why are you helping me?" he demanded, pulling his arm free. "You barely know me." The girl stopped abruptly, turning to face him. In the faint light, her features were sharper than he remembered. Her jaw set with determination, her eyes blazing with intensity. "Why do you worry so much?" she shot back, her voice tinged with amusement. "Does it matter why I'm doing this? Just be glad I am." "That's not an answer," Marcus countered, crossing his arms. "You're risking your life for someone you don't even know. There has to be a reason." She sighed, shaking her head as if he were missing the obvious. "Fine. If you must know, I've seen too many people like you come here and never leave. Humans lured in with promises of honor and glory, only to end up gone. It's wrong. All of it. And I'm tired of watching it happen." Marcus studied her, searching for any hint of deception. But her expression remained steady, unwavering. "So, you're some kind of rebel?" She smirked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Something like that. My name is Kalira, by the way. Not that it matters." "Kalira?" Marcus repeated softly, testing the sound of it. "Well, thanks. For whatever this is." "Don't thank me yet," she said sharply, glancing over her shoulder. "We're not safe until we're far away from here." With that, she turned and resumed leading him through the labyrinthine tunnels. Marcus followed closely, his mind racing. Kalira's motives might have been unclear, but her actions spoke volumes. She was risking everything to save him, a stranger, and he owed it to her to see this through. As they navigated deeper into the underground network, the atmosphere shifted. The polished crystal walls gave way to rough-hewn stone, damp with moisture. The air smelled earthy, almost primal, and the faint drip of water echoed around them. At one point, Kalira paused to inspect a series of markings etched into the wall. They looked like ancient symbols, glowing faintly in the darkness. "This way," she murmured, pressing her hand against one of the glyphs. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a narrow passageway sloping downward. "How do you know all this?" Marcus asked as they descended. "These tunnels, the palace layout. It's like you've been planning this for years." Kalira hesitated before answering. "I grew up here. My parents served the royal family, same as everyone else. But when I got older, I started asking questions. Questions no one wanted to answer. Eventually, I figured out how things really work. How they lie. How they use outsiders like you to keep their precious planet alive." Her words carried a bitterness that struck a chord with Marcus. He knew what it felt like to question authority, to challenge systems designed to benefit the powerful while crushing the powerless. But hearing it from Kilira made it personal in a way he hadn't expected. "So, what's the plan?" he asked after a moment. "Where does this tunnel lead?" "To the surface," she replied simply. "From there, we'll find a ship. Any ship. You're getting off this planet, Marcus. No matter what it takes." He nodded, though doubt lingered in the back of his mind. Escaping Zalora Prime sounded straightforward enough, but he knew better than to underestimate Vaelithra or her forces. If they caught him and Kilira, they wouldn't hesitate to make an example of them both. They continued in silence for a while, the only sounds their footsteps and the occasional rustle of unseen creatures in the shadows. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, though whether by friend or foe he couldn't tell. Finally, they reached the end of the tunnel. A crude wooden ladder led upward, disappearing into the night sky above. Kilira climbed first, pushing open a hatch that revealed a canopy of glittering stars. Marcus followed, emerging into the cool embrace of the alien wilderness. The sight took his breath away, not because it was unfamiliar, but because it reminded him of home, of Earth. "We're not safe yet," Kilira warned, scanning the horizon. "The palace will send search parties once they realize you're gone. We need to move fast." "Then let's go," Marcus said firmly. "Lead the way." Side by side, they set off into the unknown, each step bringing them closer to freedom and further from the clutches of the Queen. But as they disappeared into the glowing forest, neither could shake the feeling that their journey was far from over. Somewhere behind them, the Lumina heart pulsed faintly, its light reaching out like a silent promise or a warning. The forest glowed faintly under the twin moons, its crystalline trees casting prismatic shadows that danced across the mossy ground. Marcus and Kilira moved quickly, their footsteps muffled by the soft terrain. For a brief moment, they allowed themselves to believe they might actually escape, the palace far behind them, the search party still unaware of their flight. But as the first distant hum of patrol drones shattered the silence, reality came crashing back. "They're already looking for us?" Kilira muttered, her voice tight with urgency. She grabbed Marcus's arm and pulled him into the cover of a cluster of luminous shrubs. The drone's light swept over their hiding spot, illuminating the air in pale blue beams before moving on. They held their breath, hearts pounding in unison. Once the hum faded into the distance, Marcus exhaled sharply. "How long until they find us?" Kilira shook her head, her expression grim. "Not long. The Queen won't let this go. She'll send everything she has after us." Marcus clenched his fists, frustration bubbling inside him. "Why can't she just leave it alone? I didn't ask for any of this." "She's scared," Kilira said simply, surprising him. "Scared of losing control, of what happens if people like you start questioning her decisions. You're not just a threat to the Lumina heart. You're a threat to her power." He frowned, considering her words. "And what about you? Aren't you scared too?" She hesitated, then gave a small, wry smile. "Terrified, but fear doesn't stop me from doing what's right." Her answer caught him off guard, stirring something deep within him. In the short time he'd known her, Kilira had proven herself fearless, resourceful, and fiercely determined. Yet there was vulnerability beneath her tough exterior, a fragility she tried hard to hide. He realized he wanted to know more about her, to understand why she cared so much about saving someone like him. Before he could say anything, a loud crack echoed through the forest, startling both of them. A group of armored Zaloran guards emerged from the trees, their weapons glowing ominously. Without hesitation, Kilira grabbed Marcus's hand and bolted, dragging him deeper into the wilderness. They ran until their lungs burned, dodging between trees and leaping over roots that threatened to trip them. Behind them, the guards shouted commands, their voices echoing unnaturally loud in the stillness. Energy blasts sizzled past them, striking nearby crystals and sending shards flying. One blast grazed Marcus's shoulder, searing through his shirt and leaving a stinging burn. He winced but kept running, refusing to slow down. "Keep going," Kilira urged, her grip tightening around his hand. "We're almost there." "Almost where?" Marcus panted, struggling to keep up with her relentless pace. "There's an old bunker ahead," she explained. "It's abandoned, hidden underground. If we can reach it, we might be able to lose them." Moments later, they stumbled upon the entrance, a rusted metal hatch partially concealed by vines. Kilira yanked it open, revealing a dark staircase leading downward. They descended quickly, pulling the hatch closed behind them just as the guards arrived above. Muffled shouts filtered through the thick metal, followed by the sound of boots stomping overhead. For a few precious seconds they stood in silence, listening to the chaos above. Then Kalira turned to Marcus, her chest heaving as she caught her breath. "That should buy us some time." Marcus leaned against the wall, clutching his injured shoulder. "Yeah, but how much?" She shrugged, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "Enough to figure out our next move." As the adrenaline began to fade, Marcus became acutely aware of how close they were standing. The confined space amplified every detail. The faint glow of Kalira's translucent skin, the way her hair clung to her face from exertion, the intensity in her eyes as she looked at him. There was something magnetic about her, something that drew him in despite the danger surrounding them. "Thank you," he said quietly, breaking the silence, "for everything. I don't know why you're risking your life for me, but I'm grateful." Kalira tilted her head, studying him curiously. "You really don't get it, do you?" "Get what?" She stepped closer, closing the gap between them. "You're different, Marcus. Different from anyone else who's come here. You stood up to the Queen. You talked to the Lumina heart like it was alive, and maybe it listened. That matters. To me, at least." Her words sent a shiver down his spine. He wanted to respond, to tell her how much her courage inspired him, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he reached out tentatively, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Her skin felt warm beneath his fingertips, softer than he expected. The moment stretched, fragile and electric. Neither of them moved, neither spoke. Outside, the sounds of the search party grew louder, but for now none of that mattered. All that existed was the two of them, bound together by shared danger and something deeper, something neither fully understood yet. Suddenly, a loud thud reverberated through the bunker, jolting them back to reality. The hatch above rattled violently as someone or something tried to force it open. "They found us," Kalira whispered, her voice tense. Marcus straightened, determination hardening his features. "Then we fight." Together, they prepared for whatever came next, their bond stronger than ever. Whatever happened, they would face it side by side. The space facility loomed ahead, a jagged silhouette against the shimmering horizon of Zalora Prime. It was an old relic from a time when humans had briefly interacted with the planet's inhabitants, a forgotten outpost left to decay as diplomatic relations soured. For Marcus and Kalira, it represented their last hope. If they could sneak inside undetected, they might be able to send out a distress signal that would reach passing human ships. Kalira led the way, her movements cautious but deliberate. She had memorized the layout of the facility during her childhood explorations, long before the Queen tightened security around such places. The rusted doors groaned in protest as she pried them open, revealing a dimly lit interior cluttered with abandoned equipment. Dust motes floated lazily in the air, illuminated by the faint glow of emergency lights still flickering after years of neglect. "We don't have much time," Marcus whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "If the guards trace our path here." "They won't," Kalira interrupted confidently. "Not if we're quick." Inside, they navigated through narrow corridors lined with broken panels and tangled wires. Kalira moved like a shadow, her familiarity with the place guiding them effortlessly. They reached the communications room, a cramped chamber dominated by a massive console covered in dust and cobwebs. Marcus immediately got to work, brushing off layers of grime to reveal blinking controls beneath. "This thing still works?" he muttered half to himself. "It should," Kalira replied, hovering nearby. "The facility's power grid is tied to geothermal energy. Even if no one's used it for decades, the core systems are self-sustaining." With trembling hands, Marcus activated the transmitter. Static crackled through the speakers at first, followed by bursts of distant chatter, fragments of conversations from ships scattered across the galaxy. He adjusted the frequency until he found an open channel, then began broadcasting their message. "This is Lieutenant Marcus Kane of the United Earth Fleet," he said urgently into the microphone. "We are stranded on Zalora Prime, coordinates 347-921, Gamma. Request immediate assistance. Repeat. Request immediate assistance." He repeated the message several times, each transmission laced with desperation. Kalira watched silently, her expression unreadable. Finally, after what felt like hours, a response crackled through the static. Lieutenant Kane, this is Captain Alara Voss of the Stellar Vanguard. We've received your distress signal. Stand by, we're en route. Relief washed over Marcus, so overwhelming it nearly brought him to his knees. They're coming, he breathed, turning to Kalira with a grin. We're getting out of here. But their joy was short-lived. Outside, the unmistakable hum of patrol drones grew louder, accompanied by shouts from the search parties. The Xylorans had found them. We need to move, Kalira urged, already pulling him toward the exit. Now! They slipped out just as the first wave of guards breached the facility, narrowly avoiding detection. Ducking behind a cluster of boulders near the perimeter, they watched as the guards swarmed the building, their weapons glowing ominously in the twilight. How long do we have? Kalira asked, clutching her side. Not long, Marcus admitted grimly. Minutes, maybe less. Kalira nodded, her resolve unwavering despite the odds stacked against them. Then let's make those minutes count. Together, they retreated deeper into the wilderness, finding temporary refuge in a secluded cave overlooking the facility. From there, they waited anxiously, scanning the skies for any sign of the approaching ship. Minutes stretched into eternity, every sound magnified by fear and anticipation. Finally, a bright streak cut through the atmosphere, a sleek vessel descending rapidly toward the surface. The Stellar Vanguard landed mere kilometers away, its engines roaring like thunder. Before the Xyloran forces could react, Marcus and Kalira sprinted toward the landing zone, dodging blasts of energy and leaping over obstacles. As they neared the ship, the ramp lowered, revealing armed crew members ready to provide cover fire. Marcus shouted instructions, waving wildly to catch their attention. A group of soldiers rushed forward, forming a protective barrier as they ushered him and Kalira aboard. Go! Go! Marcus yelled once they were safely inside. The ramp retracted, and the ship lifted off seconds later, leaving Zalora Prime far below. As the planet shrank into a distant speck, Marcus collapsed onto the floor, exhausted but alive. Beside him, Kalira sat quietly, her eyes fixed on the viewport as the stars stretched into streaks of light. Neither spoke, words weren't necessary. They had made it. Against all odds, they had escaped. Weeks later, they arrived at New Terra Colony, a bustling human settlement orbiting a distant star. The colony welcomed them warmly, offering shelter and support after their harrowing ordeal. Over time, Marcus and Kalira settled into a new life together, one filled with peace and purpose. Their bond deepened with each passing day. What had started as mutual survival evolved into something stronger, love born from shared struggles and unspoken understanding. One evening, under the soft glow of artificial sunlight, Marcus knelt before Kalira, holding her hands gently. You saved my life, he said softly. More than once. I owe you everything. Will you stay with me? Forever. Tears welled up in Kalira's eyes as she nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes. They married soon after, surrounded by friends they had made in the colony. Their wedding was simple yet heartfelt, a celebration of resilience and unity. In the years that followed, they built a family together, raising children who inherited the best traits of both worlds. Marcus's courage and Kalira's determination. Life wasn't without challenges. They often faced questions about their unusual pairing, and Kalira struggled at times to adapt fully to human customs. But they faced every obstacle side by side. Together, they created a legacy not just of survival but of hope. And as they stood together one evening, watching their children play under the twin moons of New Terra, Marcus couldn't help but smile. They had come so far, from the cold confines of a crystalline prison to the warmth of a home they had built themselves. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Because sometimes, even in the vastness of the universe, two souls could find each other and change everything.